Hello and welcome to Sports Talk on a Budget. It is Tuesday, August 29th. It's the evening here, a beautiful evening here in Utah. It is football season. Football season is upon us. The NFL starts next week. College football actually started this past weekend with the unofficial start, kind of the week zero. The official start is going to be this week with week one. And now that football is here, I'm gonna do weekly podcasts breaking down both college football and the NFL, weekly picks, weekly recaps on what I saw from the games the prior weekend as well. So going to be full speed ahead with this show on a weekly basis now that football season is here. Today will be my ultimate college football preview. I'm going to go over the top storylines heading into the season. I'm going to give you my conference championship picks, my playoff picks, my Heisman contenders, and then my top 5 picks for this weekend. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the show. So as I mentioned, want to look at some of the top storylines from the offseason and from past seasons going into this college football season. And I really think the biggest storyline, or at least one of the biggest storylines going into this season, is can Georgia three-peat? Can Georgia three-peat? It hasn't been done in a very long time. Can Georgia do it? Obviously, back-to-back national champions. They put it to TCU in the national championship last year, 65-7. Were the clear best team in the league last year, in the country last year, coming as the number one ranked team in the AP poll. Anybody that didn't have them ranked as their number one team, they weren't making a correct poll. But they do have a lot to replace. Obviously, you're replacing Stetson Bennett, the quarterback who has been there for, I don't know, felt like 10 years basically. A lot of defensive players went off to the draft. Another huge draft for the Georgia defense. Another 7 or 8 players taken from that defense as well. Can they reload? Can they retool like Bama used to do in the teens and still does as well when they lose a lot of players to the draft? I think they can, and I think what really bodes well for Georgia is they play just an unbelievably soft schedule. An unbelievable soft schedule. Their toughest game is not going to be until basically mid-November, close to Thanksgiving, when they go to Neyland Stadium and play Tennessee. Other than that, there's really no team I see on their schedule that's really going to kind of threaten them. Maybe Kentucky. We'll get into that a little bit later when we get into the conference picks. But other than that, I really don't see them getting challenged or getting threatened very often throughout their season. So I do expect him to be in Atlanta, but like I said, I'll get into that a little bit more. Next kind of a storyline that I'm looking at, and it involves my team, the USC Trojans, and that is, can Caleb Williams repeat? The only repeat Heisman Trophy winner in the history of college football was Archie Griffin for the Ohio State Buckeyes back in the 70s and 80s. No one has done it since. Tim Tebow came close. He went to the ceremony a couple of times. Matt Leinart went to the ceremony in back-to-back years. So did Reggie Bush as well. So there's been people who have been close, but no one has been able to go ahead and get that second Heisman Trophy. In my opinion, yes, I'm biased as a USC fan, but I think Caleb Williams is is the best player in college football and one of the best players that has played college football over the last decade. I think he's a slam dunk number one overall pick. And currently, right now, according to Vegas, he is the Heisman favorite. Had over 280 yards passing in week 0, 4 touchdowns. So picked up right where he left off. So he's already cruising towards a Heisman campaign, but obviously a lot left to the season. But can he get that second Heisman, and can he become the second player in NCAA history and college football history to win two Heisman trophies in their college campaign? And then just something that we always have to talk about this time of year, seems like it always comes up, is Texas back. Can they live up to the hype? They're highly ranked. They're pretty much not an overwhelming favorite, but they're the favorite to win the Big 12. They're in the top 7 or 8 favorites to get to the college football playoff, and I think top 10 odds to win the national championship this year. So can Texas, Steve Sarkisian and the University of Texas finally live up to the hype? I will get into that a little bit more when I get into my conference championship picks on if I really believe they're hype, but that is a big storyline heading into the season as well. And then finally, Pac-12 is ending this year. We saw the realignment. That was my last show, talked about the realignment. They're only down to 4 teams. They could be down to 0 teams in a couple of days, or at least 2 teams if Cal and Stanford decide to go to the ACC, or if they get voted to go to the ACC. That's a story for another day, but this is the last year of the Pac-12. There hasn't been a Pac-12 participant in the college football playoff since I think like 2017, so it's been a very long time. This is a loaded conference, especially on offense, especially at quarterback. Already mentioned Caleb Williams. They have a ton of other great quarterbacks: Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Cam Rising, Dante Moore, freshman, Shadur Sanders coming in, Jane DeLora, Cam Ward, just loaded at quarterback. DJ Uyunglele transferring to Oregon State. Can one of those teams get through the gauntlet, and can the Pac-12 not basically cannibalize themselves like they do every year, and one of those teams gets through and gets to a college football playoff? I'll get to that a little bit later when I get to my playoff picks, but we'll see if I believe that that can happen. Let's go ahead and move on to my second topic, and we'll go ahead and move to the conference championship picks. And we're going to start with the conference I just talked about, and that was the Pac-12. And I'm going to give you my two contestants in the Pac-12 championship game. So right now, I'm going to roll with USC in the Pac-12 championship game. Yes, I know the defense didn't look great this past weekend against San Jose State, but they played almost 30 guys. It was almost like a scrimmage game to them. They were just feeling it out. They knew that San Jose State wasn't going to beat them, wasn't going to really actually threaten them. It was a 7-point game a couple of times, but they knew if it came down to it, they would be able to pull away from San Jose State and win the game. So the game was never really in doubt. They wanted to try some things out on defense. There was some good highlights on defense. There was some good play on defense. Jamil Muhammad played well from the corner position, or sorry, from the defensive end position, outside linebacker. Bray Alexander showed some good plays. Keon Bars, Mason Cobb, Tackett Curtis, the freshman, came in and played pretty well. Rajon Davis played well. So they had some bright spots on defense. They'll figure it out. They're not going to be Georgia's defense. That was never in the cards for USC. But as long as they can be an above average, or at least an average defense, with the firepower they have on offense, with obviously Caleb Williams, Austin Jones. Now we have Zachariah Branch, who just broke out Saturday night, was giving people Dory Jackson vibes. Reggie Bush is a little bit too far. He's only played one game, so I'm not going to go that far. But he is an absolute weapon. They have a ton of other weapons: Mario Williams, Taj Washington, Brandon Rice, Dorian Singer. Just an embarrassment of riches on the offensive end. So all they need their defense to do is be somewhat competent, which they weren't last year. If the defense is able to do that, and I think they can with the transfers they brought in, I think they can go ahead and win, or at least get to the Pac-12 championship game, and then I'll make my prediction after I say who the other team's going to be. I've been back and forth. I thought Washington. I thought Oregon. Some people are really high on Oregon. I'm not as high on Oregon as other people are. The question marks on the offensive line for me they're too much, and then losing Kenny Dillingham. And Bo Nix's two best seasons where I've been with Kenny Dillingham, one in Oregon and one in Auburn. So losing him could affect that offense as well. So I'm not that high on Oregon. Washington just lost one of their main running backs, so that's going to hurt their offense. They're not going to be great on defense either. You look at Utah. Cam Rising is questionable for the Florida game. We don't know what's going on with the ACL injury. They're playing it very close to the vest, so we don't really know what's going on there. So I'm actually going to go a little outside the box with the team who I think is going to play USC in the Pac-12 championship game, and that is going to be Oregon State. Oregon State knows who they are. They know their identity. They like to play defense and run the football. They're an old school team. Now they have to go to Oregon. That's not going to be easy, but they can still win that game. They do avoid some other teams. They don't play all the top teams in the Pac-12. So I like this Oregon State team. I think DJ Uyunglele. Now, he's not going to be great, but he's going to be an upgrade to what they had at quarterback over the last couple of years. Jonathan Smith is one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated coaches in the entire country. So go ahead and give me USC versus Oregon State in the Pac-12 championship game. And you can call me biased. You can call me a homer. You can call me whatever you want. I think USC gets it done in the last year of the Pac-12 behind Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley in that offense, and an improved defense. I'm not saying they're going to be an elite defense or an unbelievable defense, but an improved defense will be enough to get this team over the hump and get them a Pac-12 championship victory. We'll go ahead and move on to the Big 12. Big 12, I think there's a dark horse in the Big 12 that a lot of people aren't talking about, and that is Central Florida. Now, Central Florida, this is their first year in the Big 12. They bring their quarterback back, so they have continuity there. Gus Malzahn is a great coach. I think he's an underrated coach as well. In the Big 12, there's always just a team that you're just not thinking about, you're not talking about. There's always a team that kind of pops up, whether it was TCU last year, Baylor the year before. There's always kind of a team that pops every year. Some people think that's going to be Texas Tech, and I am pretty high on Texas Tech as well. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and give that dark horse team to Central Florida to be that dark horse team, but I'm not picking them to play in the Big 12 championship game. Now, the question that I had coming into the show, one of my top storylines was, do I believe the Texas hype? And I believe it enough where I think they're going to be in the Big 12 championship game. So I think Texas is in the Big 12 championship game. Quinn Ewers' second year in Sarkisian system will get better. They're really good at wide receiver. Can they replace Roshan Johnson and Bijan Robinson at running back? That's a question mark. They're going to be improved on defense. They're going to be improved on the offensive line. They're going to have more talent than any other team that they're going to play in the Big 12. I know you can almost say that every year, but hasn't been the case, and the gap is actually bigger. So their talent gap is going to be a lot more than basically any team that they see in the Big 12. So I like Texas to play in the Big 12, and I like them to play Kansas State. Kansas State returns a ton of guys off the team that won the Big 12 championship last year. Walker Howard's back as the quarterback, as the unquestioned quarterback without Adrian Martinez there. So they know who their quarterback's going to be. Chris Klieman is doing an unbelievable job there as head coach. He's doing really well with the Kansas State team. It's hard to get recruits there. It's hard to kind of compete on a high level at Kansas State, and he's been able to do that. So I think Kansas State plays Texas in the Big 12 championship game, and I may regret saying this, and I'm kind of already regretting saying it, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. Texas wins the Big 12. Texas is my Big 12 champion. Let's go ahead and move up a little bit north to the Big 10. Now, the Big 10 is the last year of what it is now. The next year they add USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon, and things really take off. And I think is going to be unbelievable, the kind of conference they're going to have there. But let's go ahead and stick with what they have now. Dark horse for me is Wisconsin. I love the hire of Luke Fickell. I think he's going to bring a different element to this team, especially on offense. Wisconsin's old school usually with how they play offense. They like to run the ball. They like to protect the quarterback, maybe shorter routes, almost like just an old school type of offense. That's not what Luke Fickell runs. I think he's going to open it up more with the transfer quarterback Tanner Mordecai from SMU. They're going to open up more. He's got a ton of experience playing quarterback at the college level. So they got some transfers at wide receiver. They're going to open it up more. They're going to be more of what the more modern day football offense, at least college football offense, looks like than we've ever thought Wisconsin would look like. I think they're a dark horse to win the whole thing, and I actually have them in the Big Ten championship game, winning the Big Ten West. So the Big Ten, this is their last year of doing two different divisions. I like Wisconsin to win the Big Ten West, get to the conference championship game, and play Michigan. I just think Michigan's too loaded all over the place. They have too many good to great players on every position. Yes, Harbaugh's suspended for the first 3 games, but they're playing 3 tomato cans. They're playing 3 teams that I could coach Michigan and they would win those games. They obviously return Blake Corum and Donovan Haskins at running back. That's huge. That's by far the best running back duo in college football this year. J.J. McCarthy's back. He's the unquestioned starter with Cade McNamara transferring to Iowa. J.J. McCarthy is that better quarterback. He does give you that extra element of pass, and he can use his legs to run. So their offense, I think, is going to be more explosive than we've seen a Michigan offense, and we know that they're always going to play defense well. And they get Ohio State at home. They have a November trip to Penn State that's going to be dicey. They could still lose that game and get to the Big Ten championship game. But I think they beat Ohio State for the 3rd straight year because Ohio State has some questions at quarterback. I think Michigan beats them for the 3rd straight year, goes to Indianapolis to play in the Big Ten championship where they'll play against Wisconsin. And in that game, I'm going to go ahead and roll with Michigan to win their 3rd straight Big Ten championship game. So the Big Ten Conference, I have Michigan winning the Big Ten Conference. Now let's move to the SEC. I have 2 dark horses in the SEC that not a lot of people are talking about. One in each division, so the SEC is still doing divisions as well. In the SEC East, it's going to be Kentucky. You get Devin Leary, the transfer quarterback from NC State, a guy who's played a lot of good football and a lot of football at a high level in the ACC. He could be an upgrade to Will Levis, and I think he is an upgrade to Will Levis. I was never sold on Will Levis as a good college quarterback. I thought he was not a first-round pick, and so did the rest of the NFL. He actually dropped to the 2nd round. So I like Devin Leary. I like this Kentucky team. They're going to run the ball well. They're going to play really good defense. The thing that's tough for Kentucky is they pretty much play the same style of football as Georgia, but they don't have the talent and they don't have the players of Georgia. So they like to play Georgia football against Georgia, and you're just not going to win that way. So Kentucky, I think, could be a dark horse and maybe make a run towards the SEC championship, but ultimately end up falling short and losing to Georgia most likely. In the SEC West, nobody's talking about this team as a dark horse. Everybody's talking about A&M. Everybody's talking about Auburn with Hugh Freeze. Everybody's talking about Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. Nobody's talking about Mississippi State. You're returning a quarterback who was super productive in Will Rogers. They have 18 to 20 starters that are going to be seniors. Their starting lineup average age looks like an average age of a BYU. And none of these guys went on a 2-year mission. So they have a ton of experience. Obviously, terrible situation what happened last year, losing Mike Leach. Rest in peace, Mike Leach, losing him. But you get a guy from his staff to come in there, and he's going to not run the same offense as Mike Leach, because let's be honest, no one can really run a Mike Leach offense like Mike Leach. But he has a ton of experience and a ton of talent and a ton of players who have been there and done that. Played in places like Tuscaloosa, played between the hedges in Athens, played in big environments. So there's not going to be any game or any environment for Michigan State for these players that they're going to be afraid of or they're going to be nervous for. They've been there and done all that. So I like this this Mississippi State team to be a dark horse in the SEC West, and nobody is talking about them. Nobody's talking about them. But let's get down to the teams who I think are going to make the SEC championship. I'm going to start in the West, and it was basically a 2-team race for me, and it was between Alabama and LSU. Alabama is going to have a good offensive line. They're going to run the ball well. They're going to play defense. But the question mark for me is who's going to be their quarterback? Is it going to be Tyler Buckner? Is it going to be Jalen Milroe? Is it going to be Ty Simpson? They don't even know who their quarterback is going to be yet, and we're like 4 days away from game day. And it's probably going to be about 2 or 3 guys playing this weekend to kind of fill things out because they're playing nobody this weekend. But next week when they play Texas, they better know who their quarterback is. That's all I'm saying. So just too many question marks at the quarterback position and at the wide receiver position. I know that Alabama's still going to have a talent advantage basically over everybody they play outside of Georgia if they happen to meet them in the SEC championship game. But the game has evolved, and I just don't know if playing that old school type of defense and run game style of football can still win in this day and age, especially against a team like LSU, who has a proven starter in Jaden Daniels, who's a very good player, a fringe Heisman candidate, and also good wide receivers as well, a good running game. So that's why I like LSU. I think LSU goes into Tuscaloosa, beats Alabama. What about that? Brian Kelly, his first 2 years in the SEC, gets back-to-back wins against Nick Saban. If this scenario plays out, that would be unbelievable and something that probably nobody thought could happen. So I think LSU wins the SEC West. Over in the SEC East, I think Tennessee can give Georgia a game, especially at home in that late November game. But I still think Georgia wins, and just too many good players. Kirby Smart's just the second best or maybe even the best coach right now in college football. And the rest of their schedule is just a flat-out joke. So I like Georgia versus LSU, rematch of last year's SEC championship game. And I've been back and forth with this because Georgia has a lot of good players. So does LSU. Carson Beck is going to start for Georgia. I'm going to go ahead and roll with Georgia as the SEC champion. And then we'll go ahead and finally fill out this Power 5 conference championships. And we'll go to the ACC. The ACC, to me, there's one big dark horse to me, and that's Duke. A lot of people aren't talking about Duke. They're only a 13-point underdog at Clemson this weekend. Or that's actually the Monday night game on Labor Day. Riley Leonard is their quarterback. He's a guy that no one's really talking about. He is a good quarterback and is a guy that probably will get drafted in this year's NFL draft. He's a very good player. Duke is a team that's gotten better and better every single year. I think they're a team. I think they could potentially cover that spread against Clemson. Well, I may get into that later when I get to my picks, but they're a team that I think can make some noise. Do they make the conference championship game? No, I don't think they do, but they can make some noise and kind of turn some heads. The two teams that I actually have in the conference championship game are the two kind of overwhelming favorites in this conference, and that is Florida State and Clemson. So Florida State and Clemson are the two teams for me that I think are going to be in the conference championship game in the ACC. Looking at Florida State, yes, they have a ton of talent. You're returning Jordan Travis, Jared Verse on the defensive side, some good wide receivers, some good transfer wide receivers came in. Is it enough to basically beat the bully on the block in the ACC, and that's Clemson? And you look at the Clemson side, still some question marks at wide receiver. Kate Klubnik, second year. I love the hire of Garrett Riley. They needed some sort of offensive juice, that offensive coordinator there that they just weren't getting in past years, so I love that hire of Garrett Riley. I think, and then defense is always going to be stout for Clemson. They're going to have guys on the defensive line that are going to be playing in the NFL. They're going to have guys all over that defense basically that are going to be playing in the NFL. I don't know if Florida State has quite closed that gap yet, so I'm going to go ahead and roll with Clemson to win the ACC. Now, so we have our conference champions. So we have Pac-12, we have USC. Big 12, we have Texas. Big 10, we have Michigan. SEC, we have Georgia, and ACC, we have Clemson. So you could probably say, okay, well, what four of those teams is going to make the playoff? Or we're going to have two teams like an Ohio State get in. I don't have two teams from the same conference getting into the playoff this year. My four playoff teams, not in any order, I'm not going to rank them, number one, number two. These are my four playoff teams. My four playoff teams are Georgia, Michigan, Clemson. I think Clemson either beats Florida State twice or loses to Florida State once, but beats them in the conference championship game, is either a one-loss or undefeated team, gets in. I think Dabo Swinney gets them back on track, even though they've still had 10-win seasons and good seasons these past couple of years. And my fourth and final team, and yes, you can call me a homer, you can call me whatever you want, I think Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams lead the USC Trojans to the playoff. Best player in the country, one of the best coaches in the country. That defense is improved enough with the transfers that came in and with some of the freshmen and some of the recruits that they've gotten the past couple of years, is improved enough to lead this team to a college football playoff. So those are my four college football playoff teams. Like I said, I'm not going to pick the games when it gets down to that. I'm not going to pick the winner. If I had to lean towards a national champion, I would probably lean towards Michigan, but I'm not going to go ahead and pick a national champion right now. But we will move on right now, and we're going to go ahead and move on to my Heisman Trophy picks. Let's see here. So I'm going to give you my Heisman Trophy favorites as well as a dark horse. So we'll go ahead and start with a dark horse candidate for the Heisman Trophy. Now, the Heisman Trophy has become basically a quarterback award, just like the NFL MVP, just like basically every major football league award has become a quarterback award. Either way, I wanted to throw in a kind of a dark horse player that isn't a quarterback that a lot of people aren't talking about, and that is Quinshon Judkins, the running back from Ole Miss. One of the best running backs in the country. You could put him against Blake Corum, other guys like that. I think Quinshon Judkins, he's the number one running back. He's not sharing time like Blake Corum is going to be with Donovan Haskins. He is going to be the unquestioned number one option for Ole Miss, and he's going to be the best player on Ole Miss's offense, no matter who starts at quarterback, whether it's Jackson Dart, Spencer Sanders, whoever. Quinshon Judkins is going to be their best player on their offense and probably their best player on their team, and he has a bunch of big stages. They're going to play LSU. They're going to play Georgia. They're going to play Alabama. If Ole Miss can get to like a 9-3 and Quinshon Judkins has like 1,500 yards, 15, 20 touchdowns, maybe some receiving touchdowns or receiving yards, he could be kind of a dark horse Heisman candidate. He's not getting a ton of love. You could probably get him for some really good odds if you wanted to bet the Heisman Trophy, but I like Quinshon Judkins as a dark horse. He is one of the best offensive players in the entire country, and he's a guy that not a lot of people are talking about, but he's going to be playing on a lot of big stages in October and November, so he has a chance to have a lot of Heisman moments. Getting to my top five favorites, I've already kind of mentioned this throughout the show. Caleb Williams is my number one favorite. Can he repeat is obviously the big storyline. He's the best player in the country, gives you Patrick Mahomes vibes, best quarterback in the country, just a guy who makes plays and makes things happen with his legs, with his arm, just improvises. Just a guy that never gives up on a play, and you can never count him out on a play. He is just an unbelievable quarterback. Like I said, one of the best quarterbacks in college football over the last maybe decade. Guy goes up against guys like Bryce Young or Trevor Lawrence in that kind of conversation. Number two, I'm actually going to go a little outside the box. I'm going to go to LSU, and I think Jaden Daniels is a guy that a lot of people aren't talking about as much as they probably should for the Heisman Trophy. Jaden Daniels is an unbelievable player, obviously played at Arizona State, and then last year at LSU. They have a really good passing attack. He's going to put up a lot of numbers. Brian Kelly's going to let him throw it all over the yard, and I think they're going to be playing, like I mentioned and I predicted earlier, they're going to be playing in the conference championship game in the SEC. That's huge. That's a huge stage. I think Jaden Daniels can earn a lot of potential Heisman moments and get to the Heisman Trophy ceremony in New York in December as well. Number three, I'm actually going to go non-quarterback here, and this is Marvin Harrison Jr., the wide receiver from Ohio State. The best player in the country, not named Caleb Williams, is Marvin Harrison Jr. And there's some people that would argue that he's the best player in the country. I don't think you can argue that because of the importance of quarterback. But still, Marvin Harrison Jr. is an absolute freak. He's an absolute beast. Who's throwing him the ball? They just announced that today. It's going to be Kyle McCord. Is Kyle McCord going to get him the ball enough for him to get real Heisman consideration? Devontae Smith won the Heisman in 2020 for Alabama. That was a shortened COVID season. The SEC and the ACC and conferences like that played a lot more games, so he kind of had a leg up on the rest of the country. So that might have been kind of an anomaly. But Marvin Harrison Jr., make no mistake about it, is the second best player, at least in my opinion, in the entire country when it comes to overall offensive players, and I just think overall players. We'll go ahead and go to number 4. My number 4 Heisman contender is going to be Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback from Washington. Now, one of their starting running backs went down a couple of weeks ago. They're going to have a great passing attack, and if Washington wants to do what they think they can do this season, get to a conference championship game, maybe get to a playoff or at least contend for a playoff, it's going to be on the back of Michael Penix Jr., and if they're able to do that, Michael Penix Jr. will be in New York for the Heisman ceremony. And then to round out my top 5 Heisman contenders, I'm going to go back to Texas, and we're going to give them even more hype, even though they probably don't need any more hype because the hype train is off the tracks at this point, and that is Quinn Ewers, the quarterback at Texas. They're loaded at wide receiver, Xavier Worthy, Isaiah Nair. They have a ton of talent. Their tight ends will be good as well. Quinn Ewers is going to have the opportunity, especially in Steve Sarkisian's offense, to put up video game numbers. Can he do it? Can he be that guy? Can he be that guy that can lead Texas to a conference championship game and contend for a playoff spot? That remains to be seen, but if he does, he'll definitely have a spot in New York waiting for him at the Heisman ceremony as well. And then we'll go ahead and finish the show today with my top 5 week 1 college football picks. Go ahead and start in Washington. Just mentioned Michael Penix Jr. We have Boise State traveling to Washington, and Washington is actually a 14.5-point favorite. This isn't Chris Peterson's Boise State. Boise State is still a good program and a good team, but this isn't the Boise State of Kellen Moore, Chris Peterson, and that Boise State. I think Washington wins at home and covers, so go ahead and give me Washington minus 14.5 in this game. And then we'll go all the way to the other side in the other corner of the country, and we have number 21 North Carolina on a neutral site in Charlotte against South Carolina, and North Carolina is a 2.5-point favorite in this game. Now, this is going to be a high-scoring game. You have Drake May for North Carolina, the quarterback, and then Spencer Rattler, the quarterback for South Carolina. There's not going to be a lot of defense played in this game. Spoiler alert, bet the over. Bet the over. That's not what I'm betting here. I'm doing the spread. But North Carolina is a 2.5-point favorite. Drake May is the second-best quarterback in the country, probably going to be the second pick in the draft next year. He is a great player. I think North Carolina is just going to score a little bit too much for South Carolina, and Spencer Rattler is prone to make turnovers and bad mistakes, especially early on in the season like he did 2 years ago to Oklahoma and even last year for South Carolina. So I like North Carolina to win and cover, so give me North Carolina minus 2.5 in this game. And then we'll go to the big game Sunday night, and that is going to be number 5 LSU versus number, versus number, I think, 11 or 12 Florida State. This is the biggest game of the weekend. This is the biggest game on the schedule. LSU is currently a 2.5-point favorite in this game. Like I said, I like Florida State, but I still have question marks about if they're really all the way back. I don't have a lot of question marks about LSU. I like Brian Kelly a lot. I like Jaden Daniels. Just had him as my number 2 Heisman contender going into the season. I think LSU, now this is going to be in Florida. It's a neutral site, but in Florida, in Orlando. I think this is going to be another high-scoring game, but I like LSU to play better defense than Florida State, and I like LSU to win and cover, so give me LSU minus 2.5 in this game. And then just another game that's a little off the radar, one of the kind of the sleeper teams for the college football playoff this year as well. We have West Virginia at number 8, Penn State, and Penn State is currently a 20.5-point favorite in this game. Now, I think Penn State's a much better team than West Virginia, but I don't know if they cover that 20.5. And Neil Brown is probably the coach with the hottest seat in the country, the coach of West Virginia. So I think he's coaching for his job every single week this year for West Virginia. So I think Penn State wins this game, but I'm going to go ahead and roll with West Virginia to cover. So give me West Virginia plus 20.5 in this game. And then my fifth and final pick, we got Coach Prime making an appearance here. This is the big noon Fox kickoff game. Of course, Joe Klatt's got to do the Colorado game, of course, right? That's a conversation for another day. But we have Colorado at number 17 TCU. TCU is a 20.5-point favorite. TCU lost basically everybody from that defense, from that offense last year. You lose Max Duggan, you lose Quentin Johnson, you lose the running back as well. So they lost everybody. The running back's name's just slipping my mind. I don't know why it's slipping my mind right now. But they lost almost everybody from that offense last year. Yes, they do return a lot of talent, but 20.5 is a lot of points. Now, Colorado is not going to be a good team this year. They're going to be improved, but they're not going to be a good team. Probably about a 3-4 win team. But I think they're going to come in there with their hair on fire with pretty much nothing to lose because a lot of the pressure is going to be on TCU, especially off of the season they had last year. And I think they keep this game close enough to cover. So give me Colorado plus 20.5. Shedeur Sanders was a Division I quarterback that happened to play at Jackson State. They have just unbelievable players all over that transferred over. Travis is an unbelievable player. So they have dudes on that team. They brought in like 70-plus transfers or whatever. It's a whole renewed team, but they were 1-11 last year, so they had to renew this team. So this is Travis Hunter is the guy I was looking for. Travis Hunter is an unbelievable player that's going to probably play both corner and wide receiver. He's probably going to get some carries out of the backfield as well, some jet sweeps. He's going to make some plays there. Like I said, I think Colorado keeps it close enough. So like I said, give me Colorado plus 20.5 in this game. With all that being said, that has been my show today. Thank you for watching and listening to Sports Talk on a Budget. Football is finally here. Week 1 of college football is this Saturday. Some great games Thursday night as well. Can't wait. Thank you again for watching and have a great day.